The Familia Gladiatoria Pannonica was the first ever gladiator association in the world, which was founded 1545 years after its 440 banning from the ideas of János Vexelbaum and with his leadership. The Familia's first gladiators came from Váci's Izzó MTE karate department. The trainings happened by the favor of Attila Simák in Váci's Tungsram RT light source factory's main building's basement. The building was previously a hussar barrack, so we could say the place's spirit invited a new generation of fighters. In this basement there was a library, where in 1983 the book Cruelty and Civilization, The Roman Games by Roland Auguet about gladiator games got into János Vexelbaum's hands. The book made a great impression on him. He read it multiple times, and every single time the ritualistic aspects of the game are what caught his attention. When in 1985's December they started the first experimental fights with 6 karatekas, they had no detailed information about the ancient gladiator weapons, nor the workshop for the making of the gear. In the fights with the more primitive weapons, he could also feel those powers and emotions that made him keep going with the experiments. The place's spirit just couldn't let him rest. There were no choreographies, and due to the imperfect gear and the powerful fights, there were often small injuries. It might not have been conscious, yet still there already was an initial rituality. As he was an educator, the question how to make a positive educational example concerned him. In short, what could be the mission of a gladiator association in 1985? The first pieces of equipment, which can be seen in the pictures, were made in the TMK's workshop, relying on his qualifications in the metallurgical industry with the permission of the factory's board of directors. These pieces were by no means historically accurate. The making of uniquely shaped weapons and armor required such extraordinary knowledge that years of practice and experimenting were necessary. In today's eyes, we could say they looked pathetic. However, they were worn with pride. The first gladiator fight took place on May the 11th, 1986 on Törökmezőr near Nagymaros. The name of the festival was Peace Day. It came off as comical that under the huge Peace Day sign over the stage there were gladiators fighting. In June of the same year happened our unforgettable performance on the stage of Madách Imre Művelődési Központ, which was preceded by long conversations with Péter Mikola Németh, who was the founder and producer of Theater Fiesta. He gave this question to János Vexelbaum. You have to decide what exactly you want to achieve with these gladiator games. If you want to do sport, your current state is not enough yet. If you want to make it into a theater performance, you need to invest in acting trainings and you need the rules of theater. According to these, must you organize your performances. With these doctrinal doubts was born, with the help of Theater Fiesta, a mystery play from the pen of Péter. In the fights depicted in the play, in spite of the sustained injuries, there came a great effect with the story and commentary. But this theater approach had no continuation for a few years. For the elevation of spectacularity, they started learning choreographies. But they stopped this practice pretty soon, since in the time 2 people learn a choreography perfectly, they could learn how to fight. The ritualistic games that were paused in 86 started up again in 1993. The play Gods in the Arena was born, in which the goddess Nemesis and the spirit of Emperor Marcus Aurelius had a conversation over the fights. In 1995, they performed a passion play out of the script of poet László Gyimesi, and then in May, the first Mithras-inspired recitation with the title 13 Sentences about Creation. This piece was the first in the line of the 7 performances, which were inspired by the 7 rites of passage in Mithraism. During the Passions and the Mithras-inspired playwritings, during and after the performances were mysterious inspirations, events, and atmospheric phenomena. Within these plays, it became apparent what the association's mission's essence was. The texts said during the performances and the ethical dilemmas blooming from the occurrences of the fights and their solutions drove the viewer's attention to their lives outside and inside conflicts and their options for solutions. Comedies are not foreign from the Familia either. Frequently, the happenings in our club inspired plays, such as The Vain Judge and the Gladiators, a humorous performance, or performed with the utilization of their legionary gear's possibilities, the battle farce Career of the Goldblick Legionary. Plays also involving the audience were born. The titles Slave Fair or the Dionysia made the civilians sing, invited them to drinking and barrel carrying competitions. For their more and more diversified activities, they needed a lot of weapons, camping and performing accessories. These were made by János Vexelbaum with the help of his members. He trained himself in the sewing of clothes, tents, textile armor and footwear, the making of steel weapons and wooden shields. From the camping equipment, he was most proud of the replica of a decomposable Roman stove. The forger was also put into work, because they needed a ton of equipment made by smiths' techniques. These are complicated tasks, and most of them are impossible to do alone. So the gladiators helped and are helping to this day too, during which they are able to learn the manual tasks. Besides the fighting abilities, they get trainings in these practical skills. Over the years, more and more depictions of gladiators started surfacing on the internet, among which unique branches could be found. After the making of their arsenal, could begin the experimentation of the usage of said branches, and at last the presentation of them during the performances. These branches were in part the Crupularius, Sagittarius, Scissor and the Andibates. These branches are unique still to this day, and between the other gladiator associations, we can rarely see them brought on stage. Our first performance abroad happened in 1989, in Fadis, Italy. That was the time we got shocked by the difficulty of traveling, the responsibility and the wonders of other cultures. In 1990 came our first legionary march, from the legionary military post in Aquincum to the Colosseum in Carnuntum. With the legionary gear and the supplies, it took 12 days to complete the 310-kilometer, about 193-mile march. While doing shows after the marching all day in Esztergom, Almásfizitő, Győr, Brück an der Leitha and Bad Deutsch-Altenburg's amphitheater. With the help of the connections made in Austria, we were able to do a show in 1993 in Saalburg's reconstructed Roman fortress, amusing the numerous audiences and the legionary, barbarian and civilian reenactors. Our overwhelming success made us new connections, and within the same year we were able to go to Mayenne in France. After our successes and the Familia stepping on the international scene, in 1994 they organized a legionary meeting within the ancient ruins of the Museum of Aquincum. And then they visited the countries of Europe yearly, showing the mesmerizing fighting abilities of the first ever founded Familia Gladiatoria in the world. In 2010, they reached a record with the performances. They gave 97 shows within the year. In their 40 years, until November 11th, 2025, they gave 1,542 shows. The logistics of travel and the performances always gave such challenges that got them back down to earth, not letting the success get into their heads. During their productions, they always tried their best to not only show the bloodthirsty and brutal fights, but through them the example of honor, the imperturbable moral principles and grit too. During the trainings, travels, fights, and the dependence on each other with trust formed friendships. These relationships can be sorted within the greatest values from those which the members of the Familia acquired over the course of years. The Familia Gladiatoria Pannonica is turning 40 years old. During its function, it gave example and desire for other gladiator organizations to form and brought color to the European Roman festivals. We don't know the future. As the legend's Pompeian guard looked up at the flaming skies, he persisted by the gate, not because of survival, but because of honor. He stood guard like the Familia Gladiatoria Pannonica, watching over the legacy of the past, that in a living body, but with the spirit of the ancestors, protecting what time wants to bury.